Hey everyone. I made this slideshow to show you how I made this studio paint box that I'm using now. They call it a French Mistress, mostly because it's meant to go on the shelf part of the French easel when you're out in the studio or in the field using this guy. But mine I made a little bit bigger because I'm planning to use it only in the studio. So this box holds a 16 by 20 sheet of glass that I'm using as a palette. I took a bunch of photos along the way to show you how I built this thing. I'll tell you a little bit about the materials that I used. You'll need a sheet of wood. You're probably going to use like plywood or birch or something lightweight, but you can use whatever you want. If you want something really sturdy, you can use something a bit more expensive, but just realize it's going to cost you more. It's going to be heavier. I got a pane of glass that they cut for me at the hardware store, 16 by 20 inches. I also got 6 poplar square dowels. They sell them at where I got my materials from, which is Osh, and they sell them in 36 inches in length. And the ones that I got were 3/4 inches. So all the measurements I'm going to give you are going to be for this. So if you wanted to change the thickness in the poplar squares that you use, you'll just have to adjust it. You'll need wood glue, wood finish. I used shellac also. You'll need two 12-inch piano hinges, 8 decorative corners. Those are optional, but you'll find that you'll probably want to use them anyway. I used 2 brass toggle catches and enough acrylic paint to cover a 16 by 20 inch panel. This will be to tone your palette, and you'll want some acrylic paint, white acrylic plus whatever colors you want to tone the palette. So I use black, umber, a little bit of red oxide, but we'll get to that later. And also silicone caulk. So first step was I planned out what I needed. So I took a sheet of birch plywood that I bought from Osh, but like I said, whatever sheet of wood that you prefer should work. The one that I used was slightly less than 24 by 48 inches, and the thickness of the wood was 7/32 inch thickness, which is a little bit less than a 1/4 inch. And 6 poplar square dowels with a 3/4 inch thickness. What you're going to do is carefully measure where you need to cut the sheets of plywood into the size you need, and also the poplar squares. So I cut the poplar squares down to 2 21 and 3/4 inch pieces, 4 10 and 13/16 inch pieces, and 6 17 and 3/4 inch pieces. Those are going to make up the sides of the cradles you're about to make. You're going to need a miter saw of some sort, but I'm assuming if you're going to try to do all this sort of thing, you probably already have a way to cut wood, or else this is going to be pretty much impossible to do without these sorts of tools, at least in any satisfactory way. But anyways, so yeah, next I cut the opposing 45-inch angles to each of the poplar squares, so they'll be able to be joined together at the corners. So next, I cut the piece of birch plywood into 3 separate panels. So you got 1 21 and 3/4 inch panel and 2 10 and 13/16 panel. Next, I glued the poplar dowels down to the birch panels, and it helps to have C-clamps to make sure they adhere to the panel. So if you have those, you're going to want to use them, and if you don't, it might be a little bit tough to keep them together, so you'll have to keep an eye on the pieces of wood as they're gluing to make sure to make sure that they actually glue down to the wood properly. And also, side note, if you're trying to make canvas panels, or if you ever want to in the future, you can basically stop here and glue canvas to the front side of the panels. But back to what we're making here. So the next step, once all that dries, you are going to apply several coats of wood finish to every exposed part of the wood. And I used a bristle brush to do this, and you can use any color you prefer. The one that I used is Minwax Gunstock, and I like the way it looks, so that's what I went with. It makes it look like I used much more expensive wood than I actually did. Once that wood finish dries, you can put a couple of coats of shellac onto each side of the panel, and that will just protect it even more, make it really waterproof there. So once all that's dry, you're going to have some really handsome looking cradles there. And so you're going to put these together to make them into a box. And so what you do now is screw the piano hinges into the sides of the poplar squares so that the hinges fold inward. Once these hinges are in, you can basically make it into a box that closes. So you really got to be careful to line up the hinges with the edge so that the box closes straight. It might take a little bit of extra preparation to do that, but it's really crucial, or else it's not going to line up when it closes together. And so here's the optional decorative corners. So you're going to need 8 of these guys, 4 on the bottom and 4 on the top. Not only do they help protect the corners from getting banged up, but I just really like how they look on here. It's like a little touch of class to them. Next, I screwed 1 brass toggle catch on each side of the box lid. So this just makes sure that the lid doesn't open if you move it. If you don't have some sort of clasp on these guys, the lids might flap around a little bit. Next, we're going to tone the glass palette. And I like mixing on a tone palette, so this is why I did this. I took a mixture of white, burnt umber, and red oxide acrylic paint. And I mixed it really well so there's no real streaks. I try to get it fairly even. And I painted all across the glass, so it was one even coat. And I let it dry, of course. And I flipped the paint over and set it aside for a bit. Next, I spread silicone caulk on the bottom of the box there where I'm going to fit the glass into. And I applied it to the sides and the corners of the box and an X in the center box. You can put as much or as little as you think you need, but that's what I did. And now I set the glass pane painted side down into the box and let that dry to seal the palette to the box. And now I'm ready to start using it. There's a couple of extra things you can do to this box. Maybe you'll like doing this. I put some foam sort of square bumpers to the lids. If there's a little bit of a gap between the lid and the main box, you can put these there and it'll make sure that the box closes flat. Also, this is just something that I like to do. I drilled a screw into the side of the right hand box lid. I use those little Holbein palette cups. And so in order to have it stay in one steady spot while I'm using the palette cups, I put a screw into the side of the right hand box lid, and what you do is just slide the palette cups around the screw there so that as you're using the palette cups, you're sloshing your brush around in the medium or the solvent or whatever you're using. It doesn't start sliding around your box. If you have any other ideas, I'd love to hear them, and you can just post them here in the comments if you want. So if you have any improvements to the setup, let me know. Thanks.